This guy who's, well, not sitting right next to me, but he's on camera right across from me, Nathan Boutwell. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Listen, man, it's like every Wednesday we get into Sweethearts and Heroes. We talk about all the great work they're doing. And this morning, I'm speaking with someone in the electrical contractors business. When Tom Murphy tells me, hey, man, you got to get this guy on, it's got to happen, I trust him immensely. You guys have a partnership here that is pretty intense. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, we started working with Tom around a year ago, but he's bringing a topic kind of into the light in our industry that really needs to be talked about. It's some work that has to be done because for years, this topic of suicide and suicide in construction really, hasn't been at the surface.
No, as a matter of fact, Tom has some pretty alarming statistics that he's pretty much got pinned on his shirt sleeve, that he, and I know you know what they are as well, that he pretty much pushes every opportunity he can get in front of a microphone or in social media to bring attention to exactly what's going on in the electrical contractor field, which is dare I say, a massive misconception of what's happening.
It is when you look at the rates, right? And I mean, Tom's got great data and stats on like middle schoolers, and then he's got it on the military. But then when he started looking at the construction industry for us, he's like, wow, these rates are just way worse than they are in all of the other sectors that I work in. And it's just staggering, right? And the numbers, he's got it as somewhere, between 5 and 7 times more likely for someone in the electrical trade to take their own life than they are to be hurt in one of our top 4 hazards, the focus 4 areas. And that's it's just sad, right? And it's kind of staggering when you think about it, that this is out there, and we spend so much time and so much effort focusing on preventing injuries and focusing on, we have a term called sticky, right? Stuff that kills you. And never, before now really did this idea that suicide and a lineman taking their own life or an electrician taking their own life is in there as part of that list.
You just had a couple of days ago, your 14th annual safety and leadership summit. Is that still going on? Is that still underway?
No. So we wrap the summit up Friday. We do Thursday as kind of our educational segment where we have the tracks where people come in and they learn various topics. And then Friday, we actually do a charity golf event. We raised funds this year for the Suicide Prevention Foundation. So the summit is over for this year, but planning actually starts this afternoon for the 2026 summit.
Oh my gosh, already.
Yeah.
Boy, no time wasted, huh? You are described as a safety nerd.
Yeah, correct. I mean, why not lean in and embrace a bit of the stigma of the profession, right? There's this big debate that lives around safety folks that says, the best safety person, and there's 2 schools of thought, right? That they come from the craft, they come from the tools, and they know the job really well, or that they come through more of an academic path and they know the regulations and the rules and the theories, aka the nerd. Well, I'm kind of a hybrid, right? I used to work for a living. I actually grew up in central Vermont, southern central Vermont. I worked for a company called Hubbard and Forge, then worked for GE in Rutland as a machinist, right? So I had some time in the tools, but then in different tools than I'm in today.
Yeah.
But then I went out and I worked on a formal education and safety, and I got hearing about all of this, I'll call it the nerd stigma. Like, hey, why not lean into it and embrace it? Yep, I'm a nerd. I can layer on the chapter and verse and regulation, but can we get past that? I'll just tell you, yeah, I'm nerdy. Now let's talk about how we're actually going to make safety a little bit better.
You're the vice president of EHS and training at Northline Utilities. Where is Northline Utilities and what is EHS? What does this all mean?
Yeah, so EHS, my trade loves acronyms. It's environmental health and safety. Sometimes we also get into the security, quality. We work kind of in all of those compliance-driven disciplines. So Northline Utilities, I just celebrated its 20th anniversary. It's headquartered in Osable Forks, New York. And, the owner will tell you, we're just your nice local line contractor. Now that's a humble statement. Truth is, we're active throughout the greater Northeast. We have crews working in Maine, across all of New York. We're down into Maryland. And we also will work, virtually up and down the East Coast into the South during the storm season, helping these like major restoration efforts from hurricanes.
And you just acquired Northern Line Construction in Maine, right?
We did, yeah. We just acquired Northern Line. It's nice to have a brick and mortar operation here in Maine. That happens to be where I live now. So our footprint continues to expand.
Congratulations on that. How many employees are you overseeing?
So day to day, we run right around 400 on a kind of our stable operation.
Wow.
Now in storm, that can scale up, right? Storm is kind of a really interesting thing that happens where you just, grab a lot of people and you go and you deploy on these major efforts, and that can scale up to around 1,000 with our partners.
How long have you been at this post?
I've been with Northline just over 3 years.
Okay. So you missed the big ice storm in '98.
Correct. I was still a Vermont resident in '98, working for GE at the time.
Yeah. Wow. So, 400 employees. You've got this seminar that's going on. You're bringing in Tom. You're bringing in Rick as two of the keynotes. How many people are we talking about? How many employees are we talking about that are part of this big summit?
So our summit, we run at around 200 people. I think we have, 225-ish that usually accept, and then with a little bit of attrition, about 200 show. So it's a combination of employees, industry partners, the people that we work things like Storm with, and actually some of our customers, but around 200 every year.
I always love talking with Tom and Rick, but I wonder if when those boys are on stage, they're looking out at right around 200 employees that are looking back at them. I wonder how many folks are in the crowd, and maybe you've wondered this too, that are, for whatever reason, not happy in life, maybe even deeply troubled, maybe absorbing some of the words that are spoken that are intensely resonating. Do you wonder the same thing?
I do, and I think it's not so much that I wonder if they're there. We know they're there. And it's beyond the data that tells us they're there. We look at the number of suicides this year just in the New York State outside line local, and it's staggering. So we know they're there. What I wonder about is, are we reaching them? Are we getting to them in a way that they need?
Why is the suicide rate with electrical contractors, utility linemen across America so high? We all know the D word, demanding. It's a demanding job. It's demanding of everything, your attention and your focus, and no matter what the weather's doing, no matter how hot it is, cold it is, windy, snowy, it doesn't matter. But why is Why is the suicide rate so high?
I think there's a lot that influences it, right? There's not a single reason. And I think that's important to acknowledge, right? It's a complex issue like it is for the other groups that are impacted by this, like middle schoolers, right? But if we think about the work, it is tough conditions. It was high 90s yesterday,
Right.
and the guys are out there working 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and they're going to come back and do it the next day and the next day. And now you start to draw in some of the other elements of the job. When I think about my time at the utility, there's what they call troubleshooters out there, single worker units, right? They go out and they respond to things like carpole accidents. They see the same things our first responders see. Linemen, see that. That's part of their job. In the construction side, you're going to potentially be away from home. You're going to our superintendent in Maine lives in Maryland. So when he leaves his family, he leaves for a week or two at a time. And he stays connected, right? They talk on the phone, but it's not the same. So that's part of their world. We have a lot of veterans, and we're thrilled that they're part of our community. But veterans come with some challenges that also impact this. So there's some isolation by the structure of the job. There's parts of the culture that substance use is part of it, right? So you've got all these factors at work. And so when you've got a person who's down and they don't see other possibilities that exist, it's pretty easy for them to fall into that spiral of not feeling supported. And then you layer on that, right? This culture that has a history of being really rough on its apprentices, right? That if you watch Landman, right, of pop culture stuff right now, and you see how they treat the worm, the new guy on the crew, right, how they prank him, it's a very similar culture. So you don't necessarily have that peer support historically in the industry. That's changing because that needs to change. But you've got all these things that kind of combine that create the environment.
Yeah. I'm sitting here listening to you, and what's crossing my mind is how we live in a culture where we all have to be walking around fail-proof. We hate the word fail. It's the other F word. And it's whether it's pride, ego, whether it's demand, expectations. We have a family to feed, to take care of, to provide for, whatever it may be. We just don't like to, I hate to say it, but the words give up.
Yeah, we don't like to give up, and we don't like to admit, right, that we're not feeling the best. And then what I want people to think about too is think about how a lineman is kind of wired in their brain, right? It's
the fifth wire, man.
It is the fifth wire. And there's a piece of this, right, that I talk about with Tom and with Rick and with a lot of people, really, when I talk about risk and line work. If you look at those photos behind me, you see the guy in the yellow suit.
Yeah.
He is touching an energized 500,000 volt wire, right? So your average person, now granted, that's transmission voltage, right? That's high power stuff. The stuff running down the road beside your house is a lower voltage, but it can still kill you. So when people like you or I look at that, we're like, oh yeah, I would never, ever touch that energized wire on purpose. And the lineman is going to go up there and do that every day. Right? So they think about that risk differently. So they have to be mentally tough. They have to be in a spot where they can do that confidently to do their job well. That runs counter to that emotional space you and I are talking about, where if you're supposed to be this big, tough, macho person, how do you have the courage to say, man, I'm hurting and I need some help? And then if you're that crew member, that buddy with them, how do you find the way to say, dude, something doesn't seem right. Are you okay? It's not a skill that's natural at this point.
I was chatting with somebody yesterday who was telling me, have you ever ridden your motorcycle when you're exhausted? And I said, yes. And they said, have you ever been kind of dozing off while you're on your motorcycle? And I said, surprisingly, and I've been riding a bike for a long time, and I said, surprisingly, for whatever reason, no. When I get on that bike, no matter what's going on, I can generally shake it off pretty hard and stay intensely focused on not just what I'm doing, but what others are doing. And to get from A to B safely with a clear mindset. I can't imagine being disengaged enough on a motorcycle where physically, biologically, I'm starting to doze off. It's just unfathomable to me. Driving a car, absolutely. We all have. But man, there's something about when that leg swings over the motorcycle and the helmet's buckled, I am totally engaged. That's not to say that it's perfect every time. There have been some times where something that's stressful or troublesome to me or whatever, my schedule later in the day, oh my God, I forgot about that doctor's appointment. I think it's next Thursday. I hope I wrote it down in my calendar. I'm not saying that doesn't ever happen when I'm on a motorcycle, but generally, if it does, I can snap back quickly and be aware, oh my God, hey, hang on a second. You're getting distracted. Shake it off. Think about this later. If you do that in your line of work, you could be dead instantly.
Correct. There are similarities between what you talk about with the motorcycle and with the risk of line work, right? And we see, folks get hurt, right, at those high risk moments, but really most of the time things go right because there is a level of focus, a level of planning, a level of making sure it goes right that goes into those jobs. Because that is part of the mindset, right? Is I have to think differently to be able to touch that energized wire, but I also know that it can kill me. So I do those things I need to do it right. When we look at the suicide issue, we're seeing it, it's nights, it's weekends, it's off hours, right? It's when we're in that alone time that we're seeing it. But you're right, the risk is there and it's present. We see this in storm, right? We typically go through the first couple of days of a major storm event with very few issues because people are so focused on that risk, right? Something is different, the system is a mess, and we're very focused on those sticky things, the stuff that can kill you as a worker, right? And this is something that we really reinforce all the time, that we try to keep that conversation alive, right? Let's talk about the stuff that can kill you and how you're going to make sure that that energy doesn't touch you, how it's not going to kill you.
It's remarkable to me because, especially during storms and whatnot, you're in a hotel, you're trying to get sleep, you're trying to take care of yourself, and meanwhile, life is still happening on the outside of this bubble. Your family, you got kids, you got a husband or a wife at home that's got stresses and, frankly, things that need to be taken care of immediately. But you've got to be sharp and on your toes and 100%, not 99, but 100% focused It's unreal, man. There's a lot of pressure here.
There is a lot of pressure, and life continues to happen around you. We all have a spouse, a partner, right? And if they're having a bad day, they're probably going to reach out, right? So those things are there. And then, yeah, for your average storm, you're 2-3 days, you're at the hotel, you're looking, you can recover. Some of these, what they call destination storms, where you go away. We had crews in Pennsylvania earlier this year who were in what we call a man camp, right? Where there's shower trailers and there's housing trailers, and they're set up in like a parking lot by a railroad track. So these trains are going all night. They're not getting good sleep, right? It's just a really, really rough environment sometimes.
Questions here, because I'm so curious. What's the guy behind you on the lines there? What are those lines hanging down below him?
So in that one, they're using ropes to get up and down from the line. We call it rope access. So it's just a way to get them up without having to use a truck, or to, you climb the tower once, you set up the ropes, and then zip up and down.
I'm just confused. Like, from a gravity standpoint, the ropes are hanging below him, though, so they're not pushing him up. So explain.
So he's got an ascender. He's got a mechanical device that helps him basically climb the rope up. So it's a power assist.
Wow. These guys, I'm guessing, when they get down off the pole or down off the wires, that they're wide awake, and maybe even kind of coming off some euphoria.
Yeah, I think there's a piece to it like that. The other piece with the bare hand live line work, like the guy on the rope, is very methodically planned, right? Every step, every detail. There's often drawings, there's crew briefings, there's folks looking out for each other. There is a lot of rigor and discipline that goes into that to make sure it goes right, because there are no second chances there. So all those things you describe when they come down, yeah, right, job well done. I relate it to, right, the fire service, law enforcement. There's a piece of that where when they get done with an operation, they also have that moment.
Yeah.
And it's similar.
When an accident does happen, whether it's lethal or not, I can only imagine the residual effects it has on surrounding and supporting staff members, people that were there, witnessed it, and frankly, the rest of your entire team, whether or not they were even in that city, that town. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it has far-reaching effects, right? I've worked at several places that have fatalities in their history, and one of the things the industry talks about is how the rules are written in blood, and that is true in some cases. Here in Maine, the utilities have some very specific rules that can be tracked back to a fatality. You talk about the ice storm of '98. There's a very specific work hour rule related to storm work that comes out of a fatality at that time. And people still talk about the fatality and the person, and it makes a lasting impact on everyone involved, right, at various levels. There's also this huge push that comes that you then have to recover from, with regulators, with clients, with public perception. So it impacts a lot of families, a lot of businesses, and there's a lot of work that goes into recovering from something like that and getting back to that ability to do work again and have the right mindset to do high risk work with a group like this.
You've got such a huge job here, which is to do your job. But in addition to that, though, Nathan, you've also got to be watching all of these employees with a totally different hat on your head and making sure that they're okay, not necessarily always relying on them to come to your office and knock on your door and say, hey, man, I need a break, or I'm questioning things. I'm not sure if I can do this, or I'm not sure how much longer I can do this, or I need a couple of days off. My marriage is in trouble. I'm exhausted. And I was really rattled by what I experienced. You can't always rely on that knock on your office door. You've got to catch the problem before it happens. That's a huge responsibility. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting when we think about what our safety teams do in the field, right? Is sometimes they have to be a bit like law enforcement, right? Enforcing the rules. And sometimes they're teaching and educating, and sometimes they're more like someone's pastor or a therapist, right? And they're having to navigate through being all of these different things to people that they need in a way that kind of meets them where they are. And I think some of the ways that Tom and Rick are helping with this, right, is we're starting to build part of that fluency within the crews. We're starting to use them to help some of these, big, tough, Tom calls them the tattooed bearded guys, right?
Yeah.
To help them as a group understand that they can be that person who maybe is a little bit softer today and opens up and says, hey, what's going on? Talk to me about it, right? Or becomes that approachable person. Because at the end of the day, if they don't knock on my door, but they knock on someone else's, that's okay. What I want people doing is getting the help they need in that moment of need.
How did you meet Tom? How did you meet Rick? Sweethearts and Heroes, which is, this is a student empowerment movement that is impacting so many thousands of children. But a connection with an electrical utility company. I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah, so Tom's got a great story about this, and we should definitely use him at some point to tell that, because he really enjoys telling it. But the beauty of being having a company based in the North Country is our employees have kids in the school system. They have spouses who work in the school system, and our summit is planned with a group, right? We don't do this in a vacuum. We use the power of a team to do it. And one of our team members said, hey, you got to look at these sweethearts and heroes and see the great stuff they're doing. This is a little bit of what they're doing in schools. We think that it might be a fit for the summit. So I cold called Tom, right? Dropped him a note and said, hey, let's talk about this. And last year he did some circles for us. It went really well. We got great feedback on it. And that kind of starts us on the journey to where we are this year, where Tom keynoted and ran more circles, and Rick did some sessions. And actually in this transition too, we've been able to get Tom involved with the National Electrical Contractors Association. He went with us to Des Moines this year to our big annual safety summit that we run.
Yeah.
And, he's working heavily with IBEW local 1249 in the New York area. So part of what they do really clicked with industry. But yeah, we met him basically through local connections, I guess, to answer the question.
Wow. What kind of impact has he had, and Rick, so far?
The first real impact, we saw this impact in Circle, right? When we ran it in our own company, where we're like, people are coming out, they're feeling emotionally vulnerable. They're feeling connected. So we saw an impact there, but where it really, really started to click was when we were in Des Moines at the national conference, and they're doing their opening, and they're going through the carousel of photos of linemen who had taken their own lives. And you look around and you're like, man, guys are emotionally shaken by this, right? There's grown men who are clearly emotional. And then watching them engage with Tom and Rick afterwards to say, yeah, we get it. We understand the message. And how do we get involved? And then seeing that happen again at our summit is I think, a good indication.
And then you got Rick up there, the man who defines resilience and hope, where most people would look at and say, oh, hell no. If I had gone through half of that, I would want to punch out. There are, as you and I both alluded this morning, there are people, there are employees in your audience who are maybe going through hell. Maybe they are on fire, burning alive, and have frankly lost hope. You got Rick up there, who's like the epitome of the example of hang on, possibilities exist. Not all of us are wired that way. We don't think that way.
Yeah. I love that part of Rick's message. The other part I love about Rick's message is, and I didn't get here alone, right? It took a network around me. It took professionals that helped me. It took my family. It took my peers, that I didn't do this alone. And one of the hard, you talk about those folks and are we reaching them? One of the things that a safety person kind of struggles with is you never actually see the times you win, right? You don't see what you prevent. And it's got to be the same at some level for Sweethearts and Heroes, right? Is for that person who's sitting there, that their life is just a mess, and they look at Rick and they go, oh, if this guy can do it, so can I.
Yeah.
And they go out and they get some help, but they don't do it in a way that we ever find out about. They don't come through the company resources. They do it on their own.
Right.
We're never going to hear about it, but it is still a win. All they have to do is reach one or two of those people, and it's a win.
I reached out to a couple of linemen here in Vermont. I think 3 of them, maybe 4. I can't remember. This was within the last probably 2 months. And actually spoke with one of them. And they all said the same thing. Would love to come on the air. Just simply, literally too busy. Going here, going there. And the guy I spoke with was like, I'd love to, man, but when's your show? And I'm like, we're live every morning at 9:00. And he's like, dude, literally impossible for me. And I'm like, you picked the day of the week. And he's like, no day of the week. And I'm like, are you serious? 7 days a week, you're going? And he said, yes. Not only am I going 7 days a week, but I'm getting home at 8:00 at night, if I'm lucky, to have dinner and maybe see my kids before they go to bed.
Yeah, it's kind of staggering when we think about it. That's accurate. The hours are long, and that can just be blue sky, right? Normal work. You're not even layering in storm. But
Right.
then you actually look at the work demand in the industry, and then while there is a bit of a renaissance going on with people moving into the trades and finding the trades as a great career path, which it is, the demand for electricians and line workers compared to the folks coming in, there's a big gap there. Some numbers put it at a 25-35% shortage of workers coming in that we need. So that challenge that they're feeling isn't going away short term, right? We've got a lot of folks that are getting into that gray hair category that are aging out, that are looking forward to retirement, and we don't have as many people coming in to fill that need as we need. It's going to be a challenging time for industry.
Is there what kind of training might happen for someone beginning this industry outside of the wires and all of the technical stuff that they have to do as their job?
So with consideration to the issues we're talking about, like mental
Exactly.
health. Yeah. So this is a new area, right? The apprenticeships do a fantastic job of preparing a line worker to do line work. But one of the things that I really love that I see happening at the moment with the IBEW apprenticeships is they're now starting to build in some of the work with groups like Sweethearts and Heroes and other organizations like Sweethearts and Heroes, right? And saying, hey, if we embed some of these ideas into our apprenticeship with the apprentices, and we teach that skill like we do the actual skills of line work, this will stay with them for their entire career. So we are starting to see that now. There's some great work going on, like I said, with Tom and Rick at Local 1249, and then another one example that comes to mind is there's a program called Veep that encourages veterans to come into the trade, and the person that leads that program is a suicide attempt survivor, self-described, and he's teaching things like meditation and journaling, and they're using it in that apprenticeship as well. So I think now that it's kind of like building a snowman, right? Now that we've kind of got that first little snowball rolling, I think we're going to see some adoption as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger in industry.
How can what's the go-to to not only get connected with you, Nathan, and Northline? Like, is there a go-to website where if someone is listening right now and they want to talk with you, or they want to ask you a question, or they want to learn more about your business, or they want to apply for a job, or maybe they just want to learn about the general industry. Is there a point website to go to?
Yeah, so Northline has its own website. Our training business, Powerline Training, also has a website. I can be reached through any of those. For LinkedIn users, I'm pretty easy to find. Another great resource is the National Electrical Contractors Association website. And then there's always, depending on in this area where you live, your local IBEW website. So New York, that would be 1249. And in the greater New England area, it'd be IBEW local 104 is the outside line local. 103 would be an example of the inside. So lots of resources out there.
Finally, in my notes this morning, I see that you occasionally will map out some diagrams on napkins. And is that just technical stuff, or is that beyond?
Yes, it's technical and it's beyond. So often what happens, a bad thing happens and someone says, well, we want to understand how it happened or why it happened.
Mm.
And what would traditionally be called a root cause analysis, right? A very linear process that's like, think like a series of dominoes and say, well, how do I stop them from falling one into the next, into the next? Well, the reality is life isn't like that, right? Life isn't just a series of things in a line that happen.
Yeah.
There's these very complex structures around us. So if you've ever seen a mind map, it's very similar to a mind map where you're saying, okay, kind of here in the center is this thing I'm trying to understand. And we're just going to doodle around it on all these influences that we're hearing about. And eventually I'm going to be able to get them into these general areas. And now I actually understand kind of how the world looked to people at the time.
Yeah.
When the bad thing happened. And so it's just a way to help us kind of understand context and the way people see the world. So then we can say, okay, now maybe how do we do something differently or better to do our work either more efficiently or safer.
Fascinating. Have you ever, maybe this is kind of an obvious answer here, had someone sit in your office and look you square in the eye and say, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I think I have to hang my helmet up and shift gears in my life because this just simply might not be for me.
Yeah, yes, we didn't talk about it in my intro. I spent 24 years in the fire service in Vermont.
Oh.
And that it was probably the first time I experienced that was related to working on the ambulance, and had a person that went all the way through the classes, went to their very first, multi-person motor vehicle accident, got back from the call and said, I just can't do this anymore. Right. And so that idea has been with me for most of my career. And yeah, when you get into this craft, you run into that. You run into the supervisor who says, I don't want to be a supervisor anymore. This is hard. And I just want to go back to being an individual contributor, a worker, or doing what I want to do. As we become members of our communities, another memory that pops into mind is, a dad going through a divorce who just reached out to me and said, dude, I don't see the possibilities that exist. That's not what he said.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But to put it in the words of Sweethearts and Heroes, he didn't see those possibilities. And I said, hey, there are, right? A lot of people have walked this path. Tell you what, let's get together for a drink. And I said, great. And then I said, where are you? And, he's thinking, oh, great. I'm going to come over. I'm going to bring a 6-pack of beer,
right.
And I show up and I got a chocolate milk for him. I'm like, dude, you don't need the drink. You don't need any of this. What you need to do is sit down and think about in your life what possibilities are out there. You're getting a divorce. You got a couple of kids. Let's talk about what your life looks like in a couple of years. Yeah. And let's talk about getting you some help that's actually a professional at this and not me. And the day that makes me one of the proudest in my life is the day the phone rings and it's that same guy who says, man, you were right. And I met a girl and we're getting married. And my life is so much better now. And I wouldn't have come through that darkness without someone helping me see what could happen.
That, my friend, is the pin on your shirt right there. Okay? I think it is.
Thank you. So do I. I mean, I think that's one of my favorite stories about, the success stories that can come out of helping people have hope and being there in that moment for them. And there's no right answer when you get that call of what you're going to do.
Sure.
But having a couple of tools in your toolbox that you get from partnering with people like Tom and Rick can help you navigate it.
Yeah. Nathan Boutwell, Northline Utilities, my guest this morning on our Wednesday edition of Sweethearts and Heroes that we talk about every single Wednesday. Man, I got to tell you, What an impactful episode this morning. Incredible to chat with you. I hope to get to meet you one of these days. Frankly, I hope that Tom will maybe even invite me to something like this, which he hasn't done yet, but that's okay.
Hey, I'll work with you one-on-one on that.
Would you please?
I will.
So if you invite me, then we'll just go over Tom's head.
Yeah, that's okay. I Rick and I have had similar conversations about how we work with Tom.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I appreciate your time is so valuable, and I appreciate you giving not only me and Sweethearts and Heroes, but so many others a full hour of your day here to push such an important message. This is light years beyond just the utility work. This is real life messaging that's going on this morning, no matter what field you're in.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm happy to have the opportunity. I'm thrilled to get on and talk about this stuff, because I think hearing from folks that are in the trenches saying, look, there's not a single answer here, but I'm out there trying to make a difference, and I'm using the tools and I'm using the current thinking is important, right? Because, maybe someone isn't struggling with the actual topic, but they're struggling with how to help.
Yeah.
And let's talk about ways we can do that too. And this is a great opportunity to share some of what we're doing with your group. And I genuinely appreciate that as well.
Incredible. Thanks so much, Nathan. We appreciate you. Have a fantastic rest of your day, my friend. And keep doing yeoman's work there. Amazing. One of our sponsors here is Washington County Mental Health Services. If you need someone to talk to, or if you think you even might, I'm going to give you a number here in a second, and you can chat with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no record kept. You're not in any file as a patient of Washington County Mental Health. You can get 3 to 5 sessions at no cost to you. And if you decide you need more services, they can help you find that as well. Washington County Mental Health. Here's the number. It's 229-0591. 229-0591. Give them a call. Tell them you listen to this episode on Aired Out, or maybe not. Maybe not. But it's just amazing stuff. I want to thank not only Sweethearts and Heroes, but also Nathan Boutwell from Northline Utilities for being with us this morning. And, of course, all of our presenting and supporting sponsors that make Aired Out possible each and every morning, Monday through Friday, live at 9 o'clock on both Facebook and YouTube. If there's an episode you enjoy, give it a thumbs up. Give it a reaction. Share it. Drop a comment. Put it on your wall. Let others know about it. Thank you ever so much. Tomorrow morning, I believe G is going to be in here. We're going to step it up. We're going to throw some gas on the fire Thursday and Friday. And yes, we are going to be talking about Rex on Friday. For sure. Right here on Aired Out. Stay well, everyone. God bless. Take good care of one another. We'll see you tomorrow morning.